We are thrilled again to have Debbie McRae here talking about prodependence from the lens of how do we help partners and relationships heal and support for partners. So I'm going to turn it over to Debbie. And for those of you that are joining on Video Land, the resources on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, you could join us live. We've got lots of live resources, drop-in groups, webinars. The podcasts are there too. And then the work groups, we've got some great work groups. Debbie, just so I throw this out there, we are thrilled to have the attachment wounds with Troy Love starting on Monday, 2/7. We'll have it happen again too. But so many people bump into their attachment wounds and shame, and so having a course to work on that. But Out of the Doghouse, Sex Addiction 101, Porn Addiction 101, and we're really happy to have the Couples Healing from Betrayal work group. It's not couples therapy. It just supports the work you're doing, but really good content with Dr. Susie LeBrock, and that will be starting March 3rd. So check all those out on the seekingintegrity.com site. So there's my public service announcements, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Debbie.
Awesome. Well, I always like to kind of bring to this group things that come up for me during the week with my clients, with different situations around the prodependence. And this last week, I've been working on several of my partners on their therapeutic disclosures. So going through that formal step-by-step process, getting them ready. And so I thought we'd talk about that today. It seems that is a subject that there's a lot of questions around. I've put together a lot of information. We'll get to what we can today, but I do encourage those that are listening, if you've had a therapeutic, disclosure, just put in the chat what your experience has been, or if you've got a question, maybe you're contemplating it, please feel free to ask, because I would like to be very specific if I can and meet your needs as well. It seems that
often, put questions in the Q&A, the chat. Yeah, like if you have just a quick comment, throw it in the chat. But questions, please put those in the Q&A so we make sure we ask those. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you for clarifying that. So one of the things that I find as I meet with a betrayed partner for the first time is they come in wanting to know, how soon can I do disclosure? I just need to know everything. I need to know it right away, because remember, it might be a very fresh discovery or disclosure, or it could be something that's even going on for a long time. And in that moment, they are feeling so dysregulated. They are in such crisis that for them, it seems like if I just have all the information, then I'm going to be okay. I'll be so much better. So some of the things I'll hear them say are things like, gosh, I wouldn't be so manic, and it would be so much easier for me if I just knew everything, if I could just get the whole story. Some will come in and say, I just feel like I'm losing my mind about what's happening because I'm only getting bits and pieces of information. Someone will say, gosh, I feel like I'm playing this a guessing game. My brain's going into the imagining how my partner's, acting out behaviors played out. And so I know for them, they really do want to get the information as soon as possible. Unfortunately, that's not the first place we go. There's some work to do, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Many of these partners have experienced not only some disclosures, but lots of times it's done in unhealthy ways. So we might see things like the staggered disclosures. So they're getting little bits and pieces of information along the way. We call that death by 1,000 cuts, right? I'm just not getting everything all at once. And so it's very painful and very traumatic. Another thing I see happening are the drive-by disclosures, right? At a very inopportune time, the addict partner will just kind of dump information on you, disclose with you, and maybe you don't have the opportunity to address it. It might be right before you go in somewhere. It might be right before, a family event. It might just be late at night. I've had a partner who shared that, late at night getting it. And, the addict partner is able to go to sleep and they're awake all night long, just worrying about what they've just heard and just really dealing with their own pain and their own trauma. And then I find a lot of the betrayed partners actually find themselves doing the interrogation disclosures, where they are going to their partner, and because we want to know the information, I'm trying to take those pieces of the puzzle, right, and create that entire puzzle, and things don't make sense. So I'm going to my addict partner and I'm asking again and again and again different things that I need to know. Now, if you happen to be an addict partner, we tell our addict partners, you've got to be honest when they ask a question. Be straightforward. If it's something that's going to create dysregulation, then offer to do that in a therapist's office. Or many times I will give my clients the direction of stop asking the questions until we get to formal therapeutic disclosure. As hard as that is, let's work on your self-care, getting you grounded, and then start writing them down. So at least you're getting them out of your body, get them in your journal. And of course, we'll talk about preparation in a minute. There are questions that you get to ask. So I sometimes get them going a little bit sooner on their questions so that they feel like they're not being ignored. So what is the difference between just a random disclosure and a therapeutic formal disclosure? First of all, when we do a therapeutic formal disclosure, we have to slow it down a little bit. There's some specific steps that we've got to make sure are in place before we do it. And those steps are, first of all, we've got to manage the crisis that's at hand. So we've got to get everybody where they're regulated. We've got to kind of understand what's going on. In essence, we've got to let the dust settle just a little bit is a good way to put it before we start figuring out, what's the next path we're going to take. I work then with the not the addict partner rather, but the betrayed partner and even the addict partner on stabilization, right? We've got to give you skills and tools because this formal disclosure that we're doing, in a therapist's office, it's difficult and it's hard. So we want to make sure that you've got the bandwidth, or like we talked about last time I was on, we want to make sure that your window of tolerance is wide enough to handle that. And should you get outside your window of tolerance during that formal disclosure, that you have the tools to help widen it again and get yourself grounded. I also like to see the couples stabilize a bit. We don't want a situation where the couples are in constant conflict, where there's a lot of anger, possibly rage. We want them to start kind of recognizing that this is a process that we are doing together, and it does take both of us. And you have to have the agreement that you're both on board. You have to both be working with, the therapist that's qualified to take you through this formal disclosure. And then once we get there, we step into that, what I call the formal healing process, which includes that therapeutic formal disclosure. And then from that point, I see relationships and the healing process, the recovery process for the betrayed partner, for the addict partner. I just see them after a successful therapeutic disclosure. It's just amazing the healing that I see. And then at that point, you can start to go deeper. Maybe the addict partner's got to do some trauma work. Maybe even the betrayed partner's got to work on her trauma around the betrayal. And then, of course, we're going to work on some of that reintegration, really going to the deeper healing with the couple itself. So I see the therapeutic formal disclosure as such a pivotal point for the healing. It really is, but we want to do it right. We want it to end up with a very positive outcome. So with the formal disclosure, it includes a very qualified trained therapist who knows how to do, I should say, guide both partners through the process, because there are specific steps that we do. Just this type of disclosure is a time where all the acting out behaviors since the inception of the relationship has occurred. So it's either done through timeline. Sometimes people will do it according to timeline. So the addict partner will do it that way. Sometimes they'll do it in regards to categories, but basically the addict partner is taking ownership of all their behaviors. There's no excuses. There's no reasoning. There's no blaming the partner, the betrayed partner. There's no minimizing. And so they're going to work on basically putting all the cards on the table. So when we come into a formal disclosure, there's been a lot of preparation work done by both parties, so that as you sit there in that disclosure, the betrayed partner can hear some really hard things and be able to stay grounded and to hear it. The addict partner, they've got to work through not only their denial regarding their acting out behaviors, maybe taking the accountability for their addict behaviors, but they've also got to be able to work through their shame. And going into formal disclosure requires that they do all of that. For the partner with a formal disclosure, we are getting her ready to receive the information. So like I said just a second ago, it's sitting there and hearing really hard things, even working through her own shame. Because many times, and we just talked about this in one of my groups this week, there's shame from me around, okay, why did I stay in this relationship? Who puts up with this? And they may even be receiving information from people who they believe are supportive and caring and loving towards them, and they're saying the same things. And so now you're sitting here and hearing some hard things. So I do talk to my betrayed partners about preparing for that to possibly come up. And then, of course, part of the preparation means that we've got to make sure we've got some really great self-care plans in place. So we talked a lot about self-care. So I think everybody understands what that entails. We went into that pretty deeply, in the last time we met. Now, there are some contraindications. There are times when we shouldn't be doing a formal therapeutic disclosure, or we need to continue working towards it. We need to postpone it a bit. So if I've got a partner who just can't stabilize, or maybe they've got an underlying mental condition, right? They might have, maybe they've got some underlying coexisting condition with depression, and we haven't been able to manage it. We want to make sure that we get that managed before we move into doing a formal disclosure. If either party is dealing with a health emergency, we don't want to risk somebody's physical health. So we've got to look at that. We also look, like I said earlier, with the stabilization of the couple. So we don't want any kind of acting out behaviors where there's physical violence. I even think verbal violence, right? Raging, none of that. There can be no domestic violence at all present. Another one is that we have to make sure that both parties agree that the formal disclosure is not going to be used against the sex addict, and that it is there, again, to help repair the relationship and for the healing purposes of the relationship. So you can't use the formal disclosure as a reason to divorce, or to determine if you are going to divorce, to use it against children. And so we've got to make sure that everybody's on board. I will not let a betrayed partner go through a disclosure, a formal therapeutic disclosure, if there's still a question of whether or not they're remaining in the relationship. They actually have talked and said the word divorce. So anyway, the next thing too is we don't want either the spouse or the partner to be suicidal, right? We want to make sure that they are safe. We want to make sure that the parties are in therapy. So if either the betrayed partner or is refusing to be in therapy, or even the addict isn't in therapy, it's not going to serve its purpose. And we need to make sure that everybody understands exactly what they're going into. So I think that for the betrayed partner, there is a lot of, it's almost like it's a goalpost in their healing. I see this a lot in my group sessions, that when I start moving them through the groups, one of the first things they will mention is, I just want to get to disclosure. I can't wait to get to disclosure. Now, they may only be 1 or 2 months into their initial disclosure or discovery. And so we're still working on that stabilization piece. And so I've got to kind of guide them and teach them, here's why we're going to get you there. I promise we will. And so we've got to make sure that, first of all, to get them there, that the addict partner is willing to take full ownership. So that's really important. And that they're working, because we're going to kind of work parallel in this process of preparation. So as the addict partner is working with his or her therapist, right, then the betrayed partner is working with theirs. So we've got to realize, we've got to get to a point where the addict partner is willing to put all the cards out on the table face up. And that's really, really important, because the purpose of this is to rebuild the trust. We're also giving the betrayed partner in the preparation work an opportunity to kind of think about, what is it that I've always needed to know? What are the cards that have been left, down, and I need them turned up, and I'm concerned that I may not know all the information I need to know. So we do work with them in putting together questions that will be asked. I like to have my clients kind of group them by categories. So of course, remember that the addict partner is going to talk about the history of their acting out behaviors, the type of acting out, maybe the locations, the devices, or the means by which they acted out. They're going to take accountability for the money that was spent, taking accountability and acknowledging the damage it's done to the relationship. So while they're working on that, I am working with the partner on putting together the questions you need to know. And we also discuss the whys. Why do you need to know that? Okay, what's the purpose? So I want my clients to go a little bit deeper to understand the whys, because there are questions that are appropriate and questions that are not appropriate. And so we do mainly talk about some general things. We don't necessarily get into specifics. And so I work with the partners on, okay, how can we word that? How can we make it maybe even a broader question than just yes or no, right? We could ask a yes or no and then ask a little more about it. So we work on that because I want to make sure, again, that these questions are there to help the betrayed partner heal. Sometimes we've got to be careful that if we ask the wrong question, it can be more triggering and more damaging. So we really work, I make my clients work through their questions at least 3 times with me before we go into formal disclosure. I just find it works. We do a rough draft, we do a correction, and then they bring in the final copy. Where I work, I actually share the questions with the addict partner's therapist, so they're aware. And oftentimes, because of where we're at, our clients sign a consent that gives me the ability to staff with the addict partner's therapist. And so oftentimes I can then give him or her the why. Here's why my partner wants to know this. So I find that's very, very helpful. And I really encourage my clients to always ask yourself the why. Why do I need to know this? Why will this help me heal? So those are the ways to approach that. The wonderful thing about the formal disclosure is finally for the betrayed partner, you have the ability to have the truth. So as you make decisions about your own growth and your own progress forward, finally you're dealing with truth versus the deception and the pain. It really pulls you out of that. And so I just love seeing the shift and the change that happens not only in my clients, the betrayed partner, but as well as in the coupleship as well. So like I mentioned, there is a structure to a therapeutic disclosure. And how we do it and how I've learned to do it, there's some general rules. First of all, we do it with therapists that are trained. So we prefer CSAT therapists. Fortunately, where I'm at, we've got a large number of CSAT therapists. So typically our clients are seeing somebody within my office. However, if they're not, we then determine and we let the betrayed partner kind of be in charge of how this formal disclosure is going to look. For example, what office they want to hold it in. We have some family offices there that hold larger groups. I will take her in there or him in there, and I will have them determine, where do you want to sit? How do you want the seating arrangement? We typically have the betrayed partner and the addict partner sitting across from each other. But where do you feel most comfortable sitting in the room? We talk about what can the partner bring in self-care wise for that formal disclosure that's going to help them in the moment. Some of them will bring in things like water to drink. They'll dress comfortably. They might bring a blanket because our offices have a tendency to be cold. They might bring in something tactile to hold. I've seen them bring in, I typically give my clients a clipboard with their questions on it. And I've seen them bring positive pictures of their children, pictures of a note that somebody's written to them like a child that means something to them. It's something that keeps them grounded. Also, I talk to my clients and we work on a self-care plan. That's really important. So not only have we seen the area that we're going to be doing the disclosure in, but I've also talked through with my clients repeatedly, okay, what are you doing leading up to disclosure? Okay, that week before, what are you going to do the week of? What are you going to do the morning of? How are you going to handle and manage things driving to disclosure? So the addict partner and the betrayed partner will drive separately to disclosure. And if you, as a betrayed partner, you're feeling like, I just can't do this alone, then you're welcome to have somebody drive you. I really encourage the partners to have a system in place. Now, we have many of them in groups. And so they alert their group. They might even process the fact that I'm having my disclosure in 3 days between groups. And so we might talk about it, make sure they're prepared. And so they can turn to somebody at any time. And the other thing I have them do is figure out who's going to support you post disclosure. Who are you turning to? So we have specific activities outlined, specific people they're going to do. We might even have the partners post disclosure not stay in the same home for a day or two. I often let my partners decide, and it's up to the betrayed partner to decide when they're ready to come back together. And we talk about what that might look like. I try to make sure that we cover as much as we can. So when they go into disclosure, they pretty much know the answers to how they're going to handle situations that come up. So when we get into the office, what we do is we plan about 2 hours for a formal disclosure. We can come back in another session if need be. We will have both of the therapists there along with the addict partner and the betrayed partner. And so as you arrive, we have each person go in with their therapist to make sure they're prepared, get them ready. And then I will take the betrayed partner to the room that we're going to be doing disclosure in. And once she's grounded and she's ready, we let the therapist of the addict partner know, and then they come in. Now, the way we do it at our offices is that we kind of talk about the purpose and the intention for doing the disclosure so everybody understands. We make sure that both parties are grounded, and then the addict partner will read their disclosure that they've worked on over the course of several months with their therapist. There's no interruptions while this is happening. And then we take a pause after it's finished. We check in with the betrayed partner, and typically I have my betrayed partners take a break. So we separate. I want to make sure, because many times there's a lot of information. So the betrayed partner has had a very difficult time capturing all the information. So that's why I'm there as the therapist. We typically make sure she's grounded. We go through the questions. Some of them have been answered. She might have additional questions that we write down, and then we bring them all back together. So the addict partner, the betrayed partner, and at that point, that's when the betrayed partner gets to ask all the questions, and the addict partner will answer. Both of them know that at any time they can take time out. We want to make sure that this is a very controlled, grounded process. At the end of all of that, once the questions have been asked and the betrayed partner feels, yes, I've gotten all the information I need for now, we typically come up with a plan. So if additional questions come up, how are you going to handle that at home? What does that look like for you as a couple? So I like to work with them to make sure that, hey, things will come up. There's going to be things that you're maybe didn't hear or you're confused about, and you want to go back and kind of check back in. So how does that work for the both of you so that you can do this together, come together, maintain connection, stay grounded? So we talk about that. And then at that point, the addict partner will read an accountability letter. And if the betrayed partner wants to, and we do this a couple of ways there, she might read her impact letter. We work on an impact letter, and we'll talk about that next time we get together. And so that's a really great exercise in helping the betrayed partner heal. Or we'll bring the couple back together later and have that partner read her impact letter. Typically at that point, my experience has been the partners at that point are doing very well. They appear very grounded. We just kind of discuss what their plan is in general with the both of them. And then again, we separate. So I spend some time debriefing with my betrayed partner, and the addict partner goes with their therapist. And then once I determine that betrayed partner is grounded, that she's got her plan in place, she feels like she's ready to move forward, then we go ahead and separate. And then I follow up within 12 to 24 hours with my client just to make sure that they're doing well, and they know at any time they can reach out to me as things come up, because things will. So we try to make this a very, very safe environment. And we do that also by adding additional things like you can't record it. There's no recording in there. We don't give the partner, the betrayed partner, a copy of the actual disclosure. But as a therapist, I'm willing, because I'm provided a copy to go through, and if we've got some confusion, we can then debrief in additional sessions as needed. So I have just found that I really see such a shift and a change in the healing progress of the betrayed partner once we do that formal disclosure. As difficult as it is, when it's done right with the qualified therapists, you're going to end up just feeling like, finally, I know everything. I think one of the hardest things as a betrayed partner is the fact that I don't know it all. And because I don't know what I don't know, it's really scary and it's very painful. So anyway, that's kind of an overview of formal disclosures. I know there's a lot more. So if you have any questions, please ask me. And it looks like we've got a few questions already. So
We do, but I have not heard drive-by disclosure. That was a new term. I had not heard that, but when you explained what it was, I have heard too many people that have done that, where it's, passing by, and then they're in a safe environment, and the poor partner is going like, I can't even react or do anything, that's a new term for me though. But and just, you mentioned too, discovery, and unfortunately lots of partners stumble over this information, so their initial gaining information is a discovery and very painful. But then I can't tell you how many people I talked to that I talked to this morning that were talking about, they did the staggered disclosure and they keep telling their partner stuff because and I just go, oh my, and they're baffled as to why their partners are so angry, and how do I help her heal? I'm like, well, stop that, because this is not helpful. You laid out such a beautiful it's a whole process, and that goes to why it needs, if you really want to do this well, so that you both are on a healing journey, with the relationship moving forward, it is a process, and it isn't, just, you owe me the information, you need to tell me, I need to know everything, all of those things. And for those that are willing, that want to have the good results, it does take time, but there's support. Like you laid out everything of, like how, I'm supporting the partner. The addict has their support therapist. They're working on being accountable. Everybody's working on this. I did think I've had a number of partners over the years that have said, I don't even need a disclosure, I know everything. But I think that, the way, like, this whole process really helps, and for some, it may be possible that they just go, it was really bad, and I'm willing to accept that, and this person is now moving forward. So it may be, but I think having that container, having the process, it just helps, helps things flow very differently. I also had this a number of times where, an addict will be talking to me and say, my partner won't work with a therapist. It's like, it's his problem. I'm going to use his and her just for, so that we can pay attention. But, he'll say, she won't work with a therapist. And so, what do we do? And to me, that would not help the whole process. If, if the goal is for the relationship, the partner needs preparation in self-care, and what do we need to know? All of those things are important so that there's a good result. So I find it would be difficult to have a disclosure if, one person is not supported and cared for in a meaningful way. So have you ever had that where someone just absolutely refused and then went ahead and did a disclosure?
I haven't personally had a client that does that. I've heard of that within the office, and typically we don't encourage them to do that. Even if we can get the partner in to meet with, let's say it's the betrayed partner who doesn't want to do therapy, right? They're not at a point. Sometimes we can get them in to meet with the addict's therapist along with the addict, and that might be an opportunity. So sometimes we can have, usually once that happens, the therapist that's working with the addict can kind of talk to the partner, the betrayed partner, and really outline for them why a therapist would be so helpful for them and how much support it would be. Because oftentimes these women, they don't have anybody to turn to. And
Right.
so once they understand, and I've had them say, just go to the therapist while you do the disclosure. And then
Mhm.
after that, you don't need to keep going. And I have had that happen. So I've gotten that partner. They come in resistant. They're not really happy about being there. And now they've been a long-term client. So
Oh, yeah.
because
Well,
they
that's good.
realize and recognize not necessarily, my skills, but the tools, the coping ideas, the concepts of prodependence, the application of it, and they see it helping them in their lives. So now they see the value. So that's been my
Yeah.
experience. And I
Well,
want to
and
go back and address
go ahead.
also that I already know everything. I don't need disclosure. So I do get that. And I say, you know what? It's not just the knowing part. It's also, like I said earlier, the fact that you're working through some really hard things. Like you said, you got to sit there and hear hard things again. There's witnesses this time. You've got to stay grounded, manage your shame. There's something about hearing it said out loud all at once from beginning to end, right? And you might be able to take in more this time. You may have forgotten some things. And so there is value in that. So I do try to encourage my clients to reconsider.
Yeah, I think if you look at it as part of the healing process,
Mhm.
and so you can't just slap a band-aid on the wound and move forward. This really
Right,
is, working on
right.
that. You mentioned, divorce,
Mhm.
and I, I I think I think it's really challenging because I think some people think, oh, we're not going to divorce, and then they hear something that is really a deal breaker
Yeah.
in that. But I really heard the message of, like, if you're already talking about divorce, let's not do a disclosure. But if people are mutually working towards healing, and for whatever reason that just can't be the case, then that to me feels different than, I mean, partners, you always get to choose. You always get to choose at some point, but hopefully going into the disclosure with good faith of, like, this is to help us create a foundation of trust that we can build on, going forward. So, um, oh, the questions. I love that you go through and really talk about the questions, because I think it really is, like, why do you want to know that? And really, what are you seeking with that? Because, like, some of them, it's like, okay, I see that. Well, there's like 10 questions about that. So can we come up with something that, will help you get the answer that you're looking for, get the information that you're looking for, without it being like, yeah, all that. But I know, we're seeking safety, we're seeking honesty, we're seeking, like, is this as bad as it really is?
Mhm.
So I mean, that, it all makes sense. I do love too that you go through, this is the location, we're going to pick all of this, so that there's this sense of, like, I know what I'm walking into. It's going to be difficult, but I have this, I have the ability to visualize before I even walk in the door that this is how it's going to be. And, like, I mean, you've done a beautiful job of laying out what a great, formal therapeutic disclosure is. But listen to how complex that is and how guided it is by professionals. So the DIY version, invariably goes badly. And I know people go, I need to know, and I want her, I want to tell her everything, and I want to be transparent. Well, but then there's too much information in one way, and lies of omission in another, and so getting the help to really do it well so that you can build on it, you know makes a world of difference. I mean,
Mhm.
I bet your success rate for couples that do this is very high. So,
Mhm.
okay, let's get to the questions. So
Yes.
if you've got questions, please, type them in the Q&A. So the first one is a 12-step program recommended for someone who's not deemed codependent? There is no such thing as codependency. Please read Dr. Rob's book, Prodependence, Moving Beyond Codependency. There is nothing in the DSM that is codependent. So, okay, that's my moment. Okay. If yes, is there an S-Anon 12-step better than one offered through COSA program? I hear other betrayed partners say it's really helped them heal, experience peace, focus on themselves, and start to live and focus less on the partner, of course. I have a hunch the 12 steps are non-codependent partners is not prodependent approach. Oh, thank you. Curious about your thoughts about the pros and cons. Thanks. So do you have thoughts? I mean, and you work with a lot of partners. So are they going to 12-step anon groups?
Well, because we are so prodependence focused, any 12-step we recommend back to, the Prodependence 12-step program. That's fairly new, and you can speak to that. But I think that, so many of the elements of prodependence will achieve the exact same things you said, where you can experience that peace. Prodependence is there to help you heal. I mean, that is my focus with these women, is getting them to that point where they're focusing on themselves and their own healing, and not so much focusing on their partners. And so I think, Tammy, you could probably, address the new 12-step program that you've got.
Yeah, and I just put it in the chat too. So for those of you live, prodependence.org, there is a small list of online groups for prodependence minded people. But all of our drop-in groups, you're here for a webinar, but the drop-in groups on sexandrelationshiphealing.com are all from a prodependent lens. I also put in there Life Anonymous book by Kristen Snowden, who is a non-addict, but she and my colleague Scott Brassert co-wrote that book, for people to use the 12 steps for self-improvement, gaining insight without the lens of you're an addict. And I think it's beautifully done. She and I did a series last year, so you'll find the videos. Step 1 was in January, etc. So on the sexandrelationshiphealing.com, you can always find the previously recorded webinars under the resource tab, and then you'll see previous webinars, and keep going because there's tons of them on YouTube, etc. But anyway, but I think you would find that really helpful. And this is always said in a 12-step meeting: take what you need and leave the rest. So if you go to a COSA program, and you go, gosh, that was really helpful, and connecting with these people, is really meaningful, great, take that. And, if they start telling you, you're part of the problem, you're codependent, not buying into that. So next question. Hang on, how do you manage the feelings of failure, anger at yourself for not having recognized your partner's betrayal and deception? Logically, I absolutely know my partner is dedicated to recovery and being honest with me, but that small voice in my head tells me I can't trust my gut feelings, as I was wrong to believe he was being faithful and honest for years while he was acting out. That is such a common refrain. So please share, how you help your partners and individually and as a group with that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of layers in that question. So first of all, let's talk about the failure and the anger at yourself. Remember, I love the analogy, and I believe Brene Brown uses it, of how we've got colored lenses, right, that we look at life through. So I tell my clients, they're looking at life through certain lenses. Well, at the time, prior to finding out that your partner had been unfaithful, you were looking at them through the lenses of that they were faithful, and you had no reason to believe that they were acting out. But now those lenses have changed. And so I understand feeling like you're a failure, that you didn't see it. But remember, you were looking at them through different lenses. And the anger at yourself that somehow you didn't pick up on it, right? Your gut didn't tell you something was going on. While there are some partners that their gut does kind of, things don't seem congruent, there are those of us that are kind of caught like out of, the left field with all of this. And as time goes on, that anger, if you're working with the right therapist and you're doing your work, we literally do a whole process on anger in the groups that I do, where we identify what they're angry about. I teach my clients to embrace their anger in a healthy way. We can't stuff our anger. We can't project it out onto other people, but we have to experience the anger. So one of the things I'll have them do is I'll have them do anger dumps, like a journal dump where you're just writing everything you're angry about, right? Even if it's about yourself, it's about your partner, it's about life in general, whatever comes up, get it out of your body. But we also want to, as we're getting out that anger of ourselves and understanding our anger, it's there to teach you something. So I tell my clients, recognize where you feel it in your body, right? Where am I holding it? Maybe it is your gut, maybe it's your heart, maybe it's your head. And then just sit in it and notice it. Does it have a color? Does it have a shape? Is it something that you can breathe away? Can you ask it some questions like, why are you showing up? What are you trying to tell me? What should I do with you? You know, can I let you go? Just kind of sit in it. Lots of times we can even do a visualization. I'll teach my clients, visualize it just leaving your body. I'll teach them to breathe. We'll make it a color and we'll have them dump it out the bottoms of their feet. Sometimes that effect is very effective in the moment. But I also believe we need to go deeper and understand, okay, what am I angry about? Remember, our brain is wired with a negative bias. So our brain has a tendency to always focus on the negative. It's going to focus on what's threatening. And our anger oftentimes shows up because it's there. It's a very intense emotion. It's there to help us move forward, to get us to do something. And so we need to understand our anger, but we've also got to learn to process it and let it go. So we'll work on that in session. And then I really focus on self-compassion, right? Because at the time in your marriage, your relationship, you were doing the best you knew how to do based on what you knew then. And now life is differently. And so we talk a lot about how can I move forward? And especially now, how can you even trust your gut feelings? Because before your gut told you, hey, everything's good, no need to worry. And I will actually teach my clients in sessions and have them work on how do I reestablish my intuition? How do I understand my gut feeling? And so we kind of go through and we own the reality of your life and kind of go through the steps. I've taken that from Vicki Tidwell Palmer's book, Moving Beyond Betrayal. I love her process in that. So we'll literally map it out on a board. And then we will start kind of moving into, okay, now, as we've looked at owning your reality, how can we tune into your intuition? So I'll spend some time on that. And you might find that your intuition might not be a gut feeling. For some of us, it's kind of like an idea in our head, or it might be just, maybe something that just kind of hits you and you've connected the dot. So sometimes you've got to work through that process. I'm not sure how early you are into, the discovery and getting the information regarding your partner's acting out, but it might be that you're still early on in the healing process. So have some compassion around that. And if you're working with a qualified therapist and you're doing the work, you're not always going to feel this way. I also want to leave you with that as well, that it is a process. And again, bringing it back around to what we talked about today, part of what your partner needs to do for you is they've got to prove that they're faithful and honest and trusting again. So yeah, we've got to see some of that going on with, right, tuning into my intuition, looking at my reality and seeing if it's all congruent. So.
Well, and I think it's really, what is your partner doing? Actions, just like Debbie was saying. But I also was thinking, is there an opportunity to go, well, I trust my gut on, like, you might not with your partner because, and addicts are so good at manipulating, gaslighting. I mean, there's terms for it. Gaslighting is a term, so it's one of those, like, addicts are really good at preserving the ability to continue to lie and, act out. So it isn't you, it really is their abilities to do that. But do you go, well, I really trust my, assuming you're a female, I really trust my girlfriend, like that person always shows up for me, and like you have gut feelings about things. Do you find that there's other places where you go, well, I can trust my gut on this? It's just this one area that was, blindsided through no fault of your own. But I think even if you can kind of go, it isn't 100%, it isn't that black and white where it's like, oh, I can't trust myself at all. If you can own that, yeah, I can trust myself on some things, but it's grieving the loss of, anger, absolutely, but also the grief work of going, gosh, my partner isn't who I thought he was. Again, he and she. My relationship isn't what I thought it was, but we're working on doing something different and new that, can move us forward in a different way. So hope for the future, but yeah, some grieving and anger and all of that, for the past and the present. So, but I really am encouraged that you see him working hard, on that's meaningful, because unfortunately I hear from lots of partners, who are talking about, and he won't do this and he won't do that, and like, it's challenging because you kind of go, there isn't a lot of hope if somebody is, no one, I'm gonna, stomp my foot and dig my heels in, and I'm not gonna do so. Hopefully that is, hopefully there's a brighter horizon, so to speak. So,
Mhm.
what type of work might the addict therapist do with the addict to ensure that they are preparing a complete and thorough therapeutic formal disclosure? My spouse seems to be very forgetful and seems to procrastinate working on writing the disclosure till last minute. It's been postponed a couple of times, and each time he avoids it till the last minute. He's finally in the hands of a qualified therapist, and we have a disclosure scheduled in a few weeks, and just revisiting the document to discuss with his therapist.
Okay, that's a hard one because you're never going to know for sure if they're being completely honest in their disclosure. Now, you're right. The important part is that he's working with a qualified therapist. And I'm hoping that that therapist is challenging him just based on the question. If I were the therapist, and I'm not giving therapy here, I'm just looking at it going, I would probably challenge each time he came in and we worked on disclosure, why are you procrastinating? And what's the resistance about? Is there shame there? Is there, yeah, he's feeling like he's maybe not doing it well enough because he is forgetful. It is not uncommon for the addict partner to forget things, because remember, it takes 3 to 5 years of recovery work for them to rewire their brains, because they have lived their existence, and I use my hand as a brain again, they've been living out of the limbic part of their brain. That's where addiction resides. And we've all been in the limbic part of our brain. When we're there and we're emotional and maybe we're angry and we say things and later we forget, right? Until we get grounded, we get reconnected to the front part of our brain. So sometimes the addict, because the way they process memory, they're not feeling emotions, it doesn't pair. So it's not as easy to bring up in memory. It can happen. That's why it takes 2 to 3 months in our practice for the addict to be working on their disclosure, because they're going back in again and again and again, and they're using a workbook. And your therapist should have tools like that they use to help you prepare for it. And so there's some work to that. So hopefully the therapist is challenging. And for you, it's just coming up with a plan that if new information comes up post disclosure, how are you going to handle it? And we do talk about that during that formal therapeutic disclosure. We will talk about, as information comes up, the addict partner has to report it within 12 hours. That's the guideline we have. And they have to sit down in a very grounded way and say, here's another thing that came up. Or if they don't feel safe doing that, then they get into their couples therapist as soon as possible, where they discuss it there. So the couples decide how we're going to handle that. So you might want to put some type of a boundary in place along those lines, because information does come up, and they may even, while they're even telling you the disclosure, information may come up that they add, in the moment. I've seen little bits and pieces, not anything really big or earth shattering, but sometimes they will. And oftentimes I find that the betrayed partner, they like to know, okay, approximately what day was this? What house were we living in? What was going on in the family at that time, right? And even the addict partner doesn't remember some of those details like the partner does, but they'll kind of discuss it as they're talking through the question part. And then that provides the information that the partner needs. So to kind of come back around to what I'm saying, they may not give you everything because they may not remember it. That's true. Number 2, come up with a plan so that if information does come up, you've determined together how you're going to share that. And then, number 3, remember that you get to ask questions. So there's going to be a little bit of dialoguing there where you might be able to get additional information as well.
So I'm going to skip one question because this is she says, I asked the last question. I'm about a year and a half into recovery. He's showing me lots of dedication and honesty to recovery, but the history of gaslighting makes it difficult for me to trust myself. It's just a blanket lack of trust in my perception. It's definitely grief too. That I would say you're right on schedule. I mean, and
Mm.
hopefully you're seeing, some progress with him, but also a lightening of your soul a little bit too. But yeah, I mean, it just takes time. He's known all of this time that he was acting out. He's known the lies. You have discovery, and then it's like that's when your clock starts ticking for all of this.
Mhm.
But it is a journey. So give yourself grace. You're doing great.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah.
And then the next question, this will be interesting. So, how do you handle polygraph tests, especially working with a large set of partner questions? So, let's talk about like I am not a fan of large set of partner questions. Like they're mind numbing, and like I had somebody that had 150 questions, and I was like, I bet we could get it down to 3, and it was all. I mean, it was really, this is what you want to know. Like it's about safety and things like that. So do you have how do you help whittle down to a manageable amount of questions? And then we'll get to the polygraph part.
Um, well, again, we go through the questions. Here's how I work it. I have my partners do them by categories. So whether they've acted out using porn or, there's been sexual acting out behaviors, or if there's been, right, we do it by categories. Then that way, lots of times as we're going through it, I say to them, this is in disclosure. I know this is going to be part of the information. So sometimes we can just eliminate it because I know that that's going to come up. But now we've kind of got that in the back of our mind. Lots of times I'll find that there's kind of repeat questions in the categories, so we can eliminate those. And again, when I get down to okay, why do you want to know that? What's the why, right? How is that going to help you with your healing? And a lot of times the partner will go, well, I guess that's really not necessary, right? So sometimes that helps eliminate it. And so we can typically whittle it down. I have had some who have had lots of questions. And here's what I find. There's a correlation between the addict partner in recovery who withholds information when the partner asks, right? So I'm having to pull it out of you all the time. So in their mind, this is my one and only chance I get to ask questions and you have to answer them, right? There's that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And those that are very open and I've told you lots of things. And so for them, there's fewer questions because they feel like at any time I can go to you, even after disclosure, and ask you a question and you'll answer me, especially when they see congruency in the actual disclosure. Betrayed partners have incredible memories. So what you've disclosed in the past, they remember. I even had a partner who said to me after we did disclosure, I remembered something he told me earlier, and he didn't mention it in disclosure. So I said, well, that may have just been a general oversight. So how do you want to go back and how do you want to ask him about it? Because you have the right to ask him. And so we determined how she could stay grounded, how she could ask him, right? And they could talk through it. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, and then the polygraph. So
Yes, the polygraph.
yes, yeah.
So people handle it differently. I'm going to tell you my experience and how we handle it. And then Tammy, you can share, your thoughts on this. But we do have somebody that we use for polygraphs. When we have had somebody who has an extensive sexual acting out history, oftentimes the betrayed partner wants to have a polygraph, and we recommend that they do it within 1 to 2 weeks post disclosure. So they need to get that scheduled before disclosure, as close to disclosure as you can get it done as possible. Now, the person that we use, because they have an extensive background and this is their specialty, they have a special psychosocial sexual history that they do. So the majority of the polygraph is not having a test, it's sitting down and having the interview. Because during that time, this particular person is very well trained in knowing what questions to ask and what information to gather. Our polygrapher also talks to the betrayed partner, and the betrayed partner has an opportunity to say, here's what I really need to know. It is not a guarantee that those are the questions that are going to be asked, because the polygrapher determines 2 to 3 questions. That's it to ask. And then once that's done, the actual report is put together within about 2 to 3 days. It goes back to the addict partner's therapist, and then they share it with me. And then that is gone over. You do not get copies of the polygraph. Now, for some of our partners, they feel like this helps them to rebuild trust. Yes, I can trust that everything you said has been shared. The majority of the time, I'm going to say 95% of the time, maybe even 99% of the time, a polygraph is accurate. But I have known people who have taken a polygraph test, passed it, and they were still acting out. However, the majority of the time, it's very accurate. And so for some partners, they want their partner to do it every 6 months at first, and maybe once a year. And then maybe after that, they feel, okay, trust is rebuilt. So that's something that we do on an individual basis. It is not a requirement. It is something that if the partner feels like that's something that they need, and again, we only refer out to one person because you cannot trust all polygraphers. And there was actually something that came up and our office was aware of recently of somebody who was giving polygraph tests and providing false results, saying that they had not passed and then trying to extort money for additional polygraph tests. So you have to be very, very careful. And so if it's something that really is helpful, you believe to the healing process, then really work closely with your therapist, make sure it's a reputable polygrapher, make sure that they know what they're doing. We're around the whole sex addiction, pornography addiction, specialty. I think, that's how we handle it.
And what you just shared, like the whole process of doing a formal therapeutic disclosure, is why it's really critically important to work with people. I'm still not a fan, and I believe that your person probably is closer to the 99% accurate. I hear all of the others, the extorting money, that isn't a shock, but I know way too many people who passed a polygraph that were absolutely still lying. And and then I know people that didn't pass that I honestly believe their sincerity. And so it's always, what are you going to do with the results? Are you going to trust them? Because the general consensus on I did a lot of research, because actually somebody from a polygraph organization had heard that I was skeptical is a kind word. And so this person reached out and was trying to convert me. And I thought, I'm going to do more research. And I actually got more. I was like, nope, I've got more information now, and really, don't find it to be helpful. And I have fear for couples who put their faith in this one thing. Their whole relationship is going to be based on this one thing that's 2 or 3 questions, often by somebody who's doing this as a side gig,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
yeah. And our polygrapher is highly, highly qualified.
Yes.
And I love the fact that, we've been to his offices, but you're right. We have to be so careful, and we have to look at what's the end result. For me as a therapist, I think my final words are, my goal is to help, my betrayed partners heal. And as a part of that healing process is, if they want their relationship with their addict partner to heal, I am there to help them facilitate it. And a big part of that is reestablishing the trust. And so I want to do whatever I can to guide them on their journey. And it is a difficult journey, but I'm telling you, I see this therapeutic formal disclosure as a pivotal point in the healing process. I really do. If it's done properly, with the right steps, with a qualified therapist, then you're going to find, I see these couples connecting, reconnecting, maybe connecting even on a deeper level than they've already come.
Yeah. And well said. We'll end with that. But yes.
Thank you.
Proper help makes all the difference. Qualified professionals. It's what we do for those who need a higher level of care. There's no more expert treatment than Seeking Integrity Los Angeles. We want people to have the best chance at moving forward in a very different way. So
and I want to echo that. Yeah, I want to echo that. I have had several partners come through whose husbands or partners have gone to Seeking Integrity, and that has been a huge shift where they have struggled before, they haven't been fully honest before, and they went into Seeking Integrity and came out very different. So
thank you. So great. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
everybody. Bye-bye.